we decided to investigate the immigrant experience into the United States over the last century. For Cecilia, Marte, and me, this was more than a history project. Both Cecilia and I have relatives who recently immigrated to the United States, so this topic is relevant to our lives. It gave us a chance to have a glimpse into the past and an opportunity to understand where we came from.
I'm from India. Came to Michigan State University as I got admission and assistantship there to do my higher studies.
I moved from the Philippines, from Manila, Quezon City, Philippines to Seattle.
America was a great country. Liberties and freedoms for people, less corruption, more honesty, a strong country.
A U.S. military base in the Philippines, which was where I was born. And during the years that I lived in the Philippines, I went there a lot and spent time hanging out at the restaurants and the grocery store and around the base. So I had been exposed to a lot of Americans. And, that was more in a military scene. But when I came here, I kind of already knew what to expect.
Came in 1965 for higher studies.
Okay. I immigrated to the U.S. when I was 9 years old, and that was in 1978.
I had a friend, T.R. Rao, came before me. So he too came 1 year earlier to Michigan State, and that was the reason why I came there, because he told me some of the things which I liked. So I went to Michigan State University.
We had some family here in Seattle, but they weren't really close relatives. We'd never met them before.
I lived in a hostel. Then mom came. We had married housing, married students housing.
University has married housing, so we rented.
So we lived there. So it was quite comfortable. British India.
Accent is different, but we know English.
Growing up, I spoke both English and Tagalog. Tagalog is the national language of the Philippines.
We are really flexible in the sense we followed our tradition with no objection for the American.
Blended very smoothly into the American culture.
We observed all important festivals as with get-togethers and puja and prayers and like that. And also we followed here Christmas, even
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving dinners. We followed everything. Both we combined and celebrate and enjoyed all the functions.
So when I started going to school, I really wanted to be Americanized and not stand out. So when I was growing up, probably up until I was in college, I really did not embrace my Filipino culture as much as I do now. And it was more of this idea of being as American as possible, fitting in as much as possible, and really sort of leaving behind my old culture. And that's changed now, but at the time when I was growing up, that was very important to me, to fit in, to be just like everyone else.
It was a new experience. I like the liberties people enjoy here. So I thought I was lucky to get an opportunity to study in the United States.
Hardworking people, honesty is there.
A couple things that really stand out in my mind when in terms of things that I observed when I lived here and grew up here and first moved here was one was the consumerism was so much different from when I lived in the Philippines. There was a lot more waste and packaging involved in the food and the way that people handled shopping. And so that was really different, and back then there wasn't a lot of recycling, and so I really noticed that. Whereas in the Philippines, people were much more oriented towards recycling or using the same bags and not as much packaging and just kind of more organic, not the organic no chemical foods, but just things coming straight from the ground and not looking beautiful in the grocery stores. So that was something that I really remember being surprised about. Another piece was socially. I grew up in a neighborhood or in a part of town that didn't have very many Asian or people of color, and it was pretty normal, you know, on a regular basis that people would make references to me, such as calling me names that were racially motivated or racist, such as chink or gook, or you know, just sometimes they talk about how much rice I ate. And that just became part of my normal world, and I didn't like it, and I expressed that I didn't, but it still came up pretty frequently. And even when people were supposed to be my friends, that was just something that was more acceptable, I guess, back then, that you couldn't really do anything about, and people weren't as aware of the implications, or that was something that they weren't supposed to do just because they hadn't been exposed to as many Asians or other people of color.
My grandparents left India in the 1960s for the same reasons many immigrants left their home countries in the 1890s. Many were looking for jobs and for education, but also liked the idea that America was a much freer society with an honest and democratic government. Some, like my grandparents and Cecilia's mom, also already had friends living in America who told them how great it was and convinced them to move here. This video was a great opportunity to learn more about our family's histories and the immigrant experience, and it put a more personal spin on the subject of immigration.